See, Barbara Brown Taylor had to concentrate on those stars. But before that, she was concentrating on the aromas coming off of her dad, and that helped her sit in wonderment of the love she felt for this man, and then concentrating on those stars, the wonderment of what it's like to be in this world today. That's, concentration narrows, and then wonderment expands, and both of them are wrapped up in reverence. My goodness. That's a paradox. The brain doesn't like paradox, but the heart loves it. The soul loves it. It gets soothed by it. Gets soothed by reverence. Brother David Standelrast. Wow, what an incredible guy. He says, we need only watch little children in their playpens to realize how perfectly they combine concentration with wonderment. What a sweet idea. And how much fun is that to watch little kids in the playpen? I've been watching, my friends Ben and his wife Erin with their 2 kids growing up on Facebook, and the wonderment of that is just awesome. It really is. And there's a story that I heard not that long ago about a grandfather who is visiting his son and daughter, and he's walking past his granddaughter's bedroom, and he hears her in there, and she's saying the alphabet, but she's saying it really slow. And he peeks in the room, she's on her knees, and she's going C, D, E, F. And the grandpa says, honey, what are you doing? He says, I'm saying my prayers, but I can't remember the prayer that Mommy taught me, so I thought I would just do the alphabet and let God figure out how the letters go together. Is that beautiful? Right? And that brings us to this idea that Jesus talks about. Be like children. Become like children. He doesn't say, be childish. Don't be childish. That's not what it's talking about. It's to become like children, but not to remain, just to take that energy of joy that they bring into the world, right? And what was she doing with that sense of concentration on the prayer and the wonderment to open up to the alphabet and letting that be her prayer? That's what she was praying. See, prayer is a beautiful path to reverence. That's why I put these 2 chapters together, reverence and prayer, because prayer is a wonderful journey. It's there to sharpen your intention, and then not just to win the attention of God. Sometimes we want to pray just to win, God, hear me. No. The prayer is to sharpen our intentions around what is wonderful about life. And as I began some studying about prayer, wow. Ernest Holmes I'm so grateful to Ernest Holmes, and you should be too, because if we were Catholic or Episcopalian, and some of you were and still are in heart, you would know there's 7 forms of prayer. Trying to get all those right, he wrapped them all into the 5 steps of treatment. You get them all, but the 7 forms, there's adoration, which is the supreme love of God. That's beautiful. I love that, all right? Then there's praise. I love praise. That's why I listen to gospel music. I love the praise music. It's just the worship, the loving worship of the divine. That song that Angela Carroll sang, what do you say, ACB? What? ACB? Yeah. ACB? See? It's got the alphabet all backwards. But praise, loving worship, and then there's thanksgiving. Basically, yay for the blessings, thanksgiving. That's a whole form of prayer. Here's one I hadn't heard before. Oblation. Oblation. That is to offer ourselves to God, to be of service, to say, here I am, Lord, use me. We sing that song. Ricky Breyer's really great one. Use me, oh God, right? I pray for you. Penitence. That is to make amends in our lives, to look at what's happened in our lives, and then to make a choice to act and behave differently. And that choice begins with a prayer to say, God, I know the wholeness that is within me is ready to be expressed. Allow me to express that, right? Then there's intercession, where you pray for another. Ask for someone else's help, to help another. Petition. Petition is to ask with grace. It's just to ask for the grace that is God. And Brother David Standelrast talks about grace is to live your life without impediments. It's to simply have a prayer where you say, I don't want any impediments in my life whatsoever. And I accept that. Those are your 7 steps of prayer. Treatment, I think, combines them all. Thank you, Dr. Holmes. We'd have to learn the 5 steps and then, boom, we're off and ready to go. But anybody who prays, whether it's the little girl that's on her knees, the grandpa, whatever, anybody who prays runs up against something that I hear about all the time. I prayed and it didn't happen. We run up against this wall that Barbara Brown Taylor calls the wall of no response, right? I've been making the prayer and I didn't get a response. I love her answer to this question, why didn't I get a response? She says, divine response to prayer is one of those beauties that remains in the eye of the beholder. Prayer is going to have a response for us that is individual to each and every one of us. That's why we go into prayer, we go into the silence, we ask the questions, and then we look for how it shows up in our lives. There was a young man whose son ended up in the hospital. And the father was kind of beating himself up because he felt like he had sort of went past the symptoms and it's just a bellyache. He'll be fine, son, go to bed. Well, it turned out he wasn't fine. He had to go to the hospital to have emergency surgery. And the kid was really struggling after the surgery. He was kind of in and out of consciousness. And he opened his eyes. His dad was sitting right there at the side of the bed, just kind of had his head down. And the son reached over for the dad. And he says, Dad, hold my hand. I hurt. And the father reached out and held his hand. And then the little boy kind of drifted off to sleep again. And the father, filled with so much love and so much compassion and some remorse and regret that he didn't do something sooner, that his son ended up in surgery, was in such pain. And he took the lead from his son and he said, Father, hold my hand. I hurt. And in that moment he felt comfort. You know, prayer and the answer to the prayer is with you. The prayer is with you. The answer is with you. And when we get into reverence, when we get into noticing, when we get into seeing what's going on and really get present with that, stand in awe, concentrate, and then open ourselves up to the wonderment of what life can bring to us, our prayers come at us that much more quickly. Brother Lawrence says, do you know who Brother Lawrence is, by the way? Brother Lawrence was this gentleman who decided at 30 years old that he was going to go and live in a monastery. And he wasn't trained. He didn't have the pedigree of some of the monks and abbots that were in the monastery. He just knew that he wanted to serve God. So he went there and he just served. He just like washed dishes and cooked food and mended clothing, and he became this wonderful expression of what it means to live as one with God. So much so that he is celebrated today, after it was in like the 14th century when he did this, and a book of his letters has been published called The Practicing the Presence. And this book has become something that has been read by theologians all over the world for its simplicity and its oneness, its joining. When we do the unification step in treatment to know that we are one with the divine, Brother Lawrence is the model of how that works. He says, at all times, every hour, every minute, even in the heights of my business, I drove away from my mind everything that was capable of interrupting my thought of God. Wow. To be in a place where everything you do, washing dishes, is an act of divine grace and pleasure. Mending clothing. Wow, I'm just in wonder of how this is coming together. Who's going to wear this and how they're going to move about their day and what they're going to do with their day. Just being grateful for what he received from all of life. That's the kind of prayer that acts up and shows up in your life as the words that you speak and the actions that you do, and then it becomes the being of who you are, where every moment is a prayerful moment. That's what they mean by praying ceaselessly. It's not about sitting down and speaking a lot of words. It's about living your life in a prayerful way. I watch Johanna in the mornings with her spiritual practice, and she's got candles all over the house. And she goes over and she lights the candle, and there's this sound, and then there's a little whiff of smoke that fills the room, and then the lighting of the candle, and at that moment, the candle, the match, and the wick come together, and it sort of flames up, and then it dies down, and then a little bit of wax melts, and then the flame gets right-sized, and then this little cone of light surrounds that candle, and then she sits in meditation and prayer. Wow. That's prayerful. That's reverence. it's beauty. And it happens because I've noticed. See, through prayer and reverence, we become something powerful. We become something connected to an experience in life that is so much larger than we ever knew. We move beyond those limits because we're in awe of all that is. There was this bishop was traveling through the South Sea Islands, and he landed on this one island, and there were these 3 fishermen that came up to him, and they recognized him as a bishop. They saw the garb that he was wearing, and they said, "Oh my goodness, we're so excited you're here. We are Christians." And he said, "You're Christians?" He says, "Yes." He was surprised to be finding 3 Christians on this island in the South Seas, And he says, "Really? Well, let's recite the Lord's Prayer together." They go, "We don't know the Lord's Prayer." Well, how do you pray?" "Oh, well, we simply say, 'We are 3, ye are 3, have mercy on us, please.'" You need to, if you're going to be good Christians, you need to know the Lord's Prayer. So he spends the entire day teaching them the Lord's Prayer. They're a little struggling. Their English is not all, they're just struggling with it. But they finally get it. It's around sunset. He gets back on his boat, and he heads off to the next few islands that he's going. On his way back that same way, which is months later, because we're talking about the South Seas, right? Months later, he goes back by this island again, and it's dusk, and he sees a light coming at him across the water. And I'm thinking, whoa. Drop anchor here. What is that light? It's the 3 fishermen. They got the little light, and they're running across the top of the water. And they're going, "Bishop, Bishop, Bishop." He goes, "What?" He says, "That prayer you taught us, how's it go again?" He's like, "Forget the prayer. Here's your prayer. We are 3, ye are 3, grace to us. And bless the bishop too while you're at it, They're walking on water because they had such reverence. They had such a belonging and such a knowing that they became like, whoa, one with the planet. They were walking on water. And he was like, "No, you got to get the words right." "No, you don't. You got to get the feeling right. You got to get the wonderment right. You got to get the concentration right. Get your intention right. When you get your intention right, the rest of it just falls into place." This is why Dr. Holmes rarely did treatments out loud. He would sit in his library for hours on end and know the truth for the people that he was praying for. Barbara Brown Taylor, the writer of this book, she has a little brass bowl on her altar. And when she gets a prayer request, she simply writes the name on the prayer request and she puts it in the brass bowl, and that's it. And for her, that's it. She knows because she's got this presence. She has her time that she spends without interruption on the thoughts of God, you see. That's how she's able to do it. When we're grateful for what we have and who we are, that's when something really special can happen to us. This is why Dr. Holmes says, treat and move your feet. Treat and move your feet, and maybe you walk on water too, or run on it. See, without practicing, this is why his book is called Practice the Present, that Brother Lawrence wrote. Without practicing, all this talk I'm doing, it's really for naught. You must practice these activities, you see. To have reverence and prayer will bring you more alive, make you more awake, but only when you practice, when you think about, spend a little time just thinking about God. Spend a little time thinking about the wonders of life. Spend a little time in concentration, looking twice, seeing what's out there, and then paying attention and letting what you're paying attention to give you some knowledge, some wisdom. This week, for example, go outside later in the week when it cools down, or later in the day when it cools down, and find your spot. Find a spot and just sit in that spot for like 20 minutes. Take the time and just be there. See what's in there. My mother used to take me to, she loved to climb trees. My mother loved climbing trees. We would climb a tree together, and we would sit in that tree, and she would tell me stories, or she'd take her sketchbook, and she'd just draw up in the tree. And it was really interesting. I would just like sit there, and suddenly you see the tree comes alive. There are ants crawling on the tree, and the way the leaves kind of twist in the sun and they change light, and the noise that the leaves make. And some trees actually talk. You listen, if you put your ear to the bark, you could actually hear something going on in that tree. There's tree language going on, you know? It's really something. But that comes from spending some time. So take some time this week and just be with nature and make a choice to just be there. It's summertime. There may be like a bug or something or a mosquito. Try not to kill it. You know, it's like the Spirit shows up in the most amazing places. I can't wait for some of you to come to the book study. She talks about the wonder and the beauty of a mosquito and the reverence for a mosquito. And you're like, really? And she goes, no, think about it. She's like, she goes right down to it. She's like, if you look at the legs on a mosquito, you're like, where do they put the knees? But the mosquito legs bend, so they must have knees, you know? And then the other thing she talks about is that if you sit there for a minute, you know, and just wait, and it lands on you, you will become bloodkin to the mosquito. It will become one with you. We think of that as I just got bit, but no, you just like became blood brothers, is what you did. It's really an interesting process. So get out there in nature and just watch. Okay, if you don't like that, if that's freaking you out, just get a piece of paper. Get a piece of paper and try this one. Draw your hand. And as you draw your hand, think about all the stuff that's on your hand. Like when I look at this hand, I think about Calvin in the 7th grade in shop class. And he's taking this pencil, and he's like going, dum, 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 dum. And I'm going, dude, why don't you just stick me in the hand? He went, oh, right there. Calvin, for the rest of my life, right? If I'm going to find him on Facebook, we got to talk, dude. He's probably a doctor. He's probably a dermatologist, and he could take this off. Talk to the hand. That's good. But this thing about noticing, it's so powerful and it's so important. In The Color Purple, Alice Walker has a character named Suge Avery. He says, I think it pisses God off if you walk by the color purple in the field somewhere and don't notice it. If you walk by the amazement, the beautiful creativity of the divine and don't notice it, look, there's only one life. That life is God. That life is my life, your life right now. Do you get pissed off sometimes? Well, that means God gets pissed off. Do you want to piss God off by missing something that God has created? Pay attention. Pay attention. And if you don't believe what God can do, read the Old Testament. He smites people. It's dangerous. Whew, no wonder Jesus had to come. No wonder they wrote the New Testament, second half, you know? Yeah, they just different pain, but we'll get past that in a later time. So take time, notice, appreciate, listen. Love prayer. Pay attention. In the book, Barbara Brown Taylor says one last thing that I want to share with you. She says, the meaning we give to what happens in our lives is our final invaluable freedom. We're the ones that decide what our life means, nobody else. That's our choice. That's our freedom. And if you want to get a clear picture of what your life means, what your prayer life means, what the happenings of your life, what your experience of life means, spend some time in reverence. Spend some time noticing. And if you give the time to notice, like the flower that George O'Keeffe does, like the mosquito that has its knees, like the tears of St. Lawrence blasting through the sky, you will find that you can see God, you can hear God, and you can know God and know that God hears you in that experience of oneness. Did you hear that? So it is. So let's do our affirmation together, shall we? Here we go. I am willing to notice, especially that whisper which is waiting to be heard. Listen. Wait. No. Go back. Listen. Wait. Shh. Take a breath. Now, I hear you. That's the thing. Take the moment to just listen. All right, let's pray. been on news blackout this week, and I've enjoyed it. But I know that there's stuff happening in the world that I want to pray about, so I'm just going to pray in general for the world. If you have something that you'd like to pray about, let's make this a voice that comes into the room, brings vibration into the universal non-local domain, and then that universal energy that's listening will answer. All right? So I invite you now to speak your word into the room, and let's do prayer. I recognize the one life that is God's life. It's not just God's life, it is God itself that expresses as life. Expresses, individualizes each and every one of us in this room. And through that expression comes infinite varieties of experience. And I'm knowing that some experiences take on a flavor that involves the taste of bitter or sour or salty. And as we move through that experience, it turns into savory, sweet, delectable, comfortable, enjoyable. It's the process of life. It's the yin and yang. It's the coming and going. This too not shall pass. This has come to pass. Whatever is going on in anyone's life, it's just a temporary stopping point onto a next adventure that promises more good, more joy, more harmony. And in this presence right now, in this time right now, I speak a word of knowing that this movement is taking place, and it's taking place at a rapidity that brings a sense of comfort and security to any person who might be sitting in a moment of strife, so that they know I have the power and the presence behind me that holds the planets in their place. And with that kind of power, I cannot lose. My joy is assured. My resolution is on its way now. I feel it coming. I open my hands and I say, yes, that's mine. Thank you. I accept. And in that acceptance, I feel a sense of gratitude that I express to the divine. And I say, thank you, Mother, Father, Spirit. Thank you, Divine Presence. Thank you, infinite knowingness, full supply for the good that you bring into the lives of each and every person in this room and those that we have held in prayer. So we now release this now into that infinite law that only knows to say, yes, here it is. And so it is. Mm-hmm. Okay.